So in this video, I turned a discarded wood cookie slab into a side table for my living room. Keeping with the same theme of rescuing rejected stuff, I also found a use for an old IKEA Dalfred bar stool. You know, the one that IKEA was probably like, let's make a chair and a lazy Susan rolled in one. Yeah, that one. And in the process, I found out why this wood was trash for a reason. Since this wood was literally a curbside find, I have no clue what species it is. Maybe ambrosia maple, cherry, or mystery wood 347? Well, if any wood experts are watching, drop a comment down below, let me know. Now, here's the general plan. I'm aiming for a 19-inch round table that's going to sit around probably 18 inches tall. And this was what the wood pattern I was going for. So first up, I prepared the wood to be flat going into this mold. And speaking of the mold, I did an intense amount of research on this, aka binge watching a ton of YouTube videos, and decided to make something usable. You'll see two of them made here, while the other one is for an upcoming video. Sides are also wrapped with some flexible plywood, also which is taped, and with brad nails and screws. Now I did seal it with some silicone so it wouldn't leak like a boat made out of Swiss cheese. I let it sit overnight, and then the next day I was ready to pour 3 liters of magic resin I got from Amazon. I was skeptical because it wasn't the fancy name brand epoxies I usually use, but hey, it was cheaper and readily available, and it worked out pretty good. Now, pro tip is before pouring, consider spraying this epoxy mold release. It worked really well for me, and the epoxy didn't stick, which is exactly what you want. So I used some black pigments to dye the wood, and I think this is where I screwed up. I should have used some activated charcoal instead, and you'll see why later. Then came my second mistake. I didn't pre-seal the wood. Turns out the wood was thirstier than I expected and drank the epoxy like it was on a bender. The finished height ended up being 1/4 of an inch below what I was aiming for, but hey, woodworking, it's all about solving problems nobody never knew existed. So I have this base right here, right? And this is basically the bare bone carcass. You have the seat that sits on top. Now, obviously, this is shorter than what it is because it's a stool, it needs to be a certain height. I cut it to the size that I want the tabletop base to be. Two unique things about this particular stand, which works in my favor, and if you're replicating it, could also work for you, is that one, this tube that goes underneath is hollow, which works perfectly because I'm going to hide like a wireless charger that's going to give a seamless look. Two is that this spins around, so you could literally raise it or lower it depending if you want the height to be matching your sofa. So this gives you ultimate flexibility, I guess, in the height. So for me, I stuck it at 19 inches, and this piece I just matched up the angles on the side and I cut it. Let me get that piece 1 second. So that was the original piece. So you could see how different it is. So what I did is I just matched the angle on the side. It was down that way. So I just matched the angle on the side and cut how much I need off of the bottom. So I just took that piece off. So this, now I'm gonna form it. For that, I have an idea. All right, let me show you how I made the form. So this is a paper template. So it's almost like a piece of pie, except the center is cut out. How do I get to this shape? I'll link a website down below. It's actually meant for sheet metal, but all you need to do is you need to input the uh, top diameter, the bottom diameter, and the height that you need it to be, and it will tell you all the dimensions that you need to cut it out. Right? So I did this as a proof of concept to see if it works, and holy shit, it works. So, I mean, you could do this with anything, and for me, it's the first time knowing this, so it's pretty cool. So, what we'll do is now this template, I am then going to transfer over, if you notice that piece on the flexible plywood, and we'll have that wrapped around. So, if you could essentially imagine, the silhouette needs to be of that size. So it's going to wrap around, and I'm going to put some center nails here, and it's going to create the base. That's pretty cool. So once I cut the shape out on the flexible plywood, I tried wrapping it around the bar stool base. Now considering it was a tight bend, I tried my level best to mold it in shape, and even tried pouring some hot water over it thinking that it would bend, but that was not the case. I tried my level best to do this, but I think the bend radius was just too tight for this application. Maybe a bigger round table, it would work, but this one, no chance. So my original plan for flexible plywood base, that plan crashed and burned. So no big deal. So I cut out some shapes from some oak veneer that was pretty thick, and I wrapped it around this bar stool or the base using some wood glue and some masking tape. Now that held it all in place while I let it dry overnight, and then I gave the seam a little bit of a light sand. I added some fancy half-round fluted trims, and I hot glued them like an arts and craft maniac. Now I made sure that these were straight because, nobody likes wonky flutes. So here comes lesson number 3. I should have stained the base completely and the flutes too before gluing, as staining those little grooves was like trying to brush a cat's teeth. Awkward and frustrating. But it turned out pretty good in the end, just took a bit of time. Now back to the epoxy top, and it was demolding time. Now thanks to the tuck tape and mold release, it popped out like a dream. I flattened it with my router because, nothing says I mean business like a 2-inch flattening bit, and everything was going smoothly until disaster struck. And I noticed my router sled was not completely flat, which made the slab also take that shape. So I had to then take more material off, and now we are at an inch. Now that's a little thin, I thought, but since it was for me and not a client, I carried on to see what the final outcome would look like. And fast forward to it, I really liked it. Now for the voids and imperfections. Because I have mild OCD, I pried them out and then filled them with Starbond glue. Now it was like, giving the table a little epoxy tattoos. So we reached the final leg, sanding and finishing. So I'll keep this quick. I sanded through all the grits, that is, started with 100, 120, 150, 180, and 240, like it was a sanding marathon. And I water popped between each grit to raise the grain. So I did use a heat gun to actually dry the water pops, and that made life much more easier and faster. Instead of for the wood to wait naturally to dry, that would take twice as long as what I did now. So far, after I sanded it to 120 grit, I added all the cutouts and roundovers for the tabletop. The one cool feature I did add was wireless charging, because, let's be honest, most of the time our phones are operating on 2 modes, whether the battery is full or in a power saving mode. So we can take more wireless chargers everywhere, not less. After a few oopsie attempts at getting the recess just right, I managed to cut a clean slot by using some masking tape and the router all dialed in. I marked the charger's location with a cool brass bow tie inlay, because why not add a little bling, right? So I traced out the template and hogged most of the material out using a router, then came back with a chisel to clean up the edge to get a snug fit. And now came the moment of truth. Did the wireless charger work? And yes, it did. Whew. I could finally relax. Now this charger was rated for 1-inch maximum, so I'm glad that it worked. And another bonus is thanks to this tool's original design, which I used as the table base, this now raises and lowers like a screw jack. Now I could adjust the height and even use it as a laptop table, which makes it truly versatile. I did sand the top down with the inlay to the higher grits, like 150, 180, and then 240. Now for anyone brave enough trying to replicate my finishing process, I would suggest do it till step number 2 with a buffer and you'll be more than happy. I, however, did a couple more steps just to satisfy my mild OCD. You know, the mild OCD. So this was my finishing process to get the most out of the wood. It was one layer brushed for the flood coat. The second layer was brushed on, and we do not take the excess off in both, the first and the second one. The third is we sand it to 400 grit, and then we buff the third layer in. And this time we take any excess off. And then the fourth is you sand with 800 grit, and then you buff in the last layer. Again, wiping any excess off. Now what makes it long is, well, you have to wait 8 hours in between each coat. Yeah, I know you can use an UV activated finish out there, but maybe I'll get to it someday, but for now, Osmo it is. So for the final touch, I applied a ceramic coating. It's like the ones that you use on cars. Now I will report back in the future if this coating held up, or if you need more specific sort of a nano coat that is formulated specifically for woodworking. So we'll see how that goes. But applying this did bump up the sheen a bit, not by much, but it made very smooth to the touch though. That's nice. So, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, and if you've got any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I promise that I'll respond to each and every single one of you guys. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.